Well, it's my pleasure to be here with you, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
A little introduction about Brad. His career journey in film and the crazy entertainment world started with creating a little community radio show at 14 years old. Your first broadcast show was then at 15, and you started a production company at 18. You spent the most part of the last 20 years learning the ropes, teaching yourself filmmaking through a shit ton of trial and error, as you said, in commercials and corporate films and music videos, etc. Everything. You also spent many years in front of the camera, hence the fact he's a total natural. You hosted a daily show on Juice TV, if anyone remembers that from back in the day. Presented live television. You've done the odd infomercial. Even been on stage in Les Miserables at the Civic. And your motto is to give things a go at least once.
Yeah, it is indeed. and to be okay to suck at that when you first give it a go once.
Yeah.
You know?
And you've spent most of your career in Auckland and are a reasonably new addition to Queenstown. Tell us when you moved here and what's sort of exciting you about being here in the South.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you for that wonderful introduction. That pretty much summarizes, I think, I just fell into it at a young age and just ran with it and just had this reckless abandon of just try everything, do it, see how it all goes. And for Queenstown, to answer your question, was always a place I wanted to come. It was always a place that felt home to me every time I came down here since a teenager with my mum and dad. When we came on family holidays, there was something calling me. The mountains were calling me. I felt that energy it felt home. Every time I flew in, I looked out the window and it felt like home. And I think after living and spending most of my life in Auckland, I sort of decided it was time to follow that calling to come and make my second home here and make that happen. So there's a couple of failed attempts at doing that over the years, but trust the timing of everything. And I think the first time I went to come down and signed a lease on a place at Glenda Drive and wanted to set up my production company here, and then went back to Auckland. I was in my late 20s, and then I got cold feet and sort of ended up losing the deposit on that place and going, no, I think I'll stay. But then my dad got sick, and sort of that led up to him passing away. So everything happens, and then I met my partner, and then when COVID hit, I said to him, right, we've got to go now. Like, this is the best time to go to Queenstown. There's actually going to be property available, because as all Queenstown locals I'm sure know, finding property and somewhere to live is the hardest thing. So I knew that was the time managed to convince my darling that it was time to move, and we've been here 5 years and absolutely love it. So
cool.
Yeah.
What excites you about being a filmmaker here in the South, or you can be honest, what is limiting about being based here?
Good question. I feel excited about the opportunity of the possibilities that are here. Being a smaller industry that isn't so saturated, I think there is a lot of opportunity here. I think from what I've seen, we could benefit from a bit more infrastructure, and I know there's been different attempts over the years at things, and I would love to see more films staying here longer than just shooting, because I think a lot of overseas productions come for the beautiful scenery, which is understandable, but then they're out just as quick as they're in. So
you want to see some post-production facilities, or
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's on my radar.
Cool. Now, you started super young as a filmmaker, professionally as a teenager, which is insane. Has anyone else here started professionally as a teenager? It's pretty insane. What was the journey like to gain respect for your work when you're so young? And do you think that studying and age and experience are important when it's just a creative role?
Great question. I was 15 when I did my first TV show on, there was Triangle Television at the time, which was a community access station in Auckland. And that was born out of, I was bored shitless at school. School didn't challenge me enough. And all the things I wanted to do, I felt held back and limited at school. And that made sense because 2 years after, when I was 17, I was diagnosed with ADHD. So that kind of all fell into place of why I just felt out of place at school. And so I was bored at school. I had this idea about wanting to have some fun during the school holidays and make this sort of tourism show and do all the fun, exciting things in Auckland. And so I planned it in the back of my school books at school while getting into a lot of trouble with teachers in the process. And then during the school holidays, I reached out to South Seas Film and Television School because at 15 I didn't have any camera gear. I didn't even have an edit suite. And Gerben, I always remember his generosity at South Seas Film and Television School. Put a call out to some students. I had a lovely camera girl, I believe her name was Louise, and she was amazing. She came on and was our camera op, and we had all the cameras supplied from South Seas. I had a post house digital masters in Auckland, in Ponsonby, who very kindly, the editor Witham, I would love to connect with him all these years later, but he generously gave his time after hours, where my dad would drop me off after school and he would finish his shift at 5 o'clock editing, and he would edit this TV show and then got the airtime and somehow managed to make a TV show. So at that time, I was very blessed to have a lot of support by people. I mean, I look back now, I think as I've gotten older, the sort of, you get in your own headspace and then you find it harder to ask for support and ask for people to help. Whereas I've actually kept some of the letters that I wrote, like from 1999, where, I'm asking for sponsorship, and like we got a rental car given to us, and a clothing company came on board, and so I guess I was less afraid back then. And then as you become an adult, you start getting in your own head more, and then those sorts of things become harder. So I had a lot of support then. In terms of when I started my production company at 18 and started working on commercials, there were a couple of key moments that stood out in terms of the difficulty of being a young person. And the challenges I had to navigate was working with, I remember I worked with a camera operator on one of the commercials that I did. And we had a lot of disagreements over some things, and I was trying to be open-minded, and I think he found it challenging to take direction from someone who was younger. So that was sort of a challenge to navigate. And then I did some work with a pretty big client. I won't say who, but I remember they were great until the point where we were moving between locations on one of our shoot days, and I had my sister had been in the car, and she had some my nephew's nappies, on the floor, and my client asked, "Oh, have you got kids?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, how old are you? Do you mind me asking?" And I think I was 19 at the time, and so I said, and all of a sudden it went from, her giving me full creative control over everything to questioning and challenging everything, and the rest of the 2-day shoot was an absolute nightmare where, I had to try and fight for this creative vision that they had already signed off on, but now all of a sudden, because they found out my age, it was all of a sudden questioned. So there were certainly moments like that. It wasn't all bad, but I think I had to learn to, working with ad agencies and creative agencies, I had to learn to go, okay, this is a time to collaborate, and this idea is great, and I'll accept that idea. And then other times to go, no, I believe that this is the path, and stand in that. But that was always hard, because especially when you're the younger person in the room, it's you feel, as though, who am I to challenge these other people who have been around for a bit longer? But I really believe that this is the right thing to do. So. And I look back on some of those things where I gave up my creative sort of decisions over those things because of the fact that I allowed those other voices to come through, and the projects probably didn't do as well as what I would have liked them to do. So it is hard at times when you're young.
Yeah. But do you think that youth doesn't matter for what matters, so to say? So you only had to fight for people's respect, but you felt capable creatively and think that young people are? Or do you think you need to study, you need to get some years under your belt and some life experience?
I mean, I have a different take on it, which is probably not the typical take.
Go
because
for it.
I didn't study. I didn't go to film school. I didn't study at film school. I was very grateful that I had some people along the way who took me under their wing and taught me things. I asked a lot of questions. I jumped on board a lot of shoots early in the day where I was just an assist, and I would just be like, hey, I remember one of the companies, they were like, look, we don't have a budget. And it's like, it's fine, I don't want to get paid. And they think they gave me about $50 a day at the time, which I don't think would be legal now, but I was like, it's fine, like $50 a day is fine, and just there to learn. And so I'm grateful that I had those people. I guess I learned that, for me anyway, that was how I learned, by just doing it, failing, trying it out. And I think that's a great way to learn, because sometimes you can learn all the theory and you can learn all of that, and then you come out of something and now you've actually got to put that into use. And sometimes that's hard.
Gaining experience in commercial filmmaking, when you knew you wanted to do your own films eventually, bring your own creative ideas to life, but what do you think was the value, or is the value, for filmmakers to work in advertising and tell other people's stories?
That's an interesting question, because I've been thinking about this a bit lately. I used to think, especially when I was doing commercials, like I got to a point after making so many, and I guess I wanted to tell bigger stories, that I wasn't sure how to take the experience that I'd learnt on commercials and translate that into film. I guess my take on that is where I think a lot of filmmakers these days need to be open to, and it's something that I'm certainly exploring at the moment, in terms of we make content, we make a film, and we want people to come and see that, obviously. But we're living in a different world now where we have to use social media, and how do you attract an audience? And when it came to social media, I had a love-hate relationship with it, and I'm like, I don't want to make these contents, and everyone's just trying to make these short 15-second reels, and I hated making short content. And then I thought to myself, what have I just spent the last 20 years doing, which is making short-term reels and content, but for a different platform, which was TV commercials, because we only had 30 seconds to tell a story. So in that 30 seconds, you've got to craft a story. And I think there's something in that I learned. And how do I tell and get this point across in the best way possible to the widest audience possible in 30 seconds? And then you had to cut that 30-second commercial down to 15 seconds, especially if you wanted bonus airtime and everything back in the day of traditional broadcast. So now I've got to take that 30-second story and condense it to 15 seconds. So I think there's definitely something in that at the time I didn't really realize what it was teaching me. But now with social media and my love-hate relationship with it, it's like, okay, cool. When you've got this project, how do you market that? How do you tell the story around that? And I guess I'm grateful to the skills that I learnt in telling micro stories in 30 seconds, especially when it comes to producing larger scale projects and trying to communicate that with an audience on social media.
You now have the business know-how and the marketing know-how too, which now every feature filmmaker needs to be an advertising person as well, right? So that's a really good angle on that, actually. You're talking about social media, but what future do you see in different mediums, and how are you playing with distributing on different mediums at the moment?
Something I'm really passionate about exploring is trying to create content that goes across multiple platforms. I really want to make stuff for the big screen, and take people to the theatre. I really think that is still a medium which has its place. But can that hold up on its own? I think we need to start using other platforms, especially YouTube. YouTube has, the growth on YouTube in terms of people accessing it, one of the latest surveys that I saw is actually more people consuming content on YouTube TV. So that means the app is installed on their TV and they're watching it on TV above Netflix. So how do you create content? But then of course, you know, to monetize that is a whole different angle. So one of the areas that I'm trying to explore is using social media to create an audience. I think as a filmmaker these days, you've got to build an audience outside of it. We can't just expect to make a film now and release it and expect that people will come. So I'm really trying to lean into using those platforms as much as I have a love-hate relationship with them to build an audience, engage people. I'm interested, something I want to explore with the documentary and the feature film that I've got in development is I really want to take people along on that whole journey. I mean, we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago where I would love to explore things like even casting online and using social media to sort of do casting and involve people in that process. And even if they're new actors who haven't got, you know, the experience themselves, how do we extend opportunities to them and allow the audience to get to know them so that by the time the film comes out, they've followed that whole behind the scenes process and now they're invested, now they want to come see it versus just seeing a trailer. Whereas I think a lot of us, we put all our heart and soul into it and we've crafted this beautiful piece of content, we've got this amazing trailer, and then we want everyone to see it, but unfortunately it's out there in a sea of content and there's far too much content out there. So there's content overload. So how do you cut through the noise in that? And I think the only way to do that is to build the audience as you go so that people are invested in it and want to come see it.
And we all used to lap up behind the scenes on our DVDs, right? And making of featurettes. We don't really have those anymore, but we could do them as we go along, share them throughout the whole process.
That's
it's a
the
really
thing.
Cool idea. Yeah.
You know, back in the times of DVDs, I used to buy the DVDs just for the behind the scenes, and I wanted to watch the behind the scenes before I watched the movie, so that I could put my mind to ease at like how they made it, because otherwise I was going to watch the whole movie being like, but how did they do that? How did they do that? So I watched the behind the scenes first, and now I could just relax and actually watch the film. So yeah, I think there's something exciting in that. Peter Jackson did it with King Kong when he did his video diaries, and I don't know if you saw any of that, but that was before YouTube really took off. I think it was like 2007 when he was in production for that. And but they had a website and he was doing video diaries about 3 times a week, and it was so cool. And they never gave anything away about the film or the actual plot line, but enough for you to go, wow, that's so cool. They never showed you what King Kong looked like or anything, but and that excited me as a filmmaker. So I'm like, how can I want to do that, and I want to explore that for the projects that I do, so that I think then people will be more invested come along on the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a bit about funding and money, which is often a huge concern for new filmmakers. And Southern Filmmakers Collective is producers, directors, writers, so the people who are worried about that. Many filmmakers take the path of like pursuing your film commission funding, your more public funding, and they think that maybe the path to getting your feature film is to do your shorts, get them funded, build up the portfolio, and then get the bigger funding pool. That's not something you've done. I'm curious to hear whether that's something you thought about doing, and why you haven't done that, and what your experiences of taking a different path with funding, with looking at investment, distribution, and making a film financially viable without going through the more public avenues.
Good question. Let me know when you figure it out. No, it's something I'm still figuring out myself. I, over the years, pitched multiple projects to New Zealand On Air for funding and the Film Commission. I always found it quite hard to break through those avenues, especially because there's not many funding avenues in New Zealand. And again, you're competing with a lot of other people out there who are all going for the same pool of funding. I years ago made a small TV show called the Pacifica Festival, which was like a behind the scenes look at one of the biggest Pacific festivals in Auckland. And I funded that myself, and it cost me about $5,000 at the time. And I shot it all, and we edited it, and I went and met with TVNZ. I forget her name. She was the commissioner at the time. She was really lovely, but they couldn't buy the program. It didn't fit the format and everything like that. But I just thought, well, I'll give it a go. And then from there, as I said, it was always a hard thing. So what excites me about, and going back to that, sorry, again, everybody's applying for the same lot of funding. The second thing is when you go to someone like Netflix, of course, that's the dream. Everybody wants the platform, and their content on Netflix. You're also giving up a lot of your creative rights to Netflix. When you sell a format, it's different if they acquire projects and content, but if they're funding something, often you're signing your rights away for like up to 10 years or sometimes more or sometimes a lifetime, and then Netflix own your rights. So that's sort of something that never quite sat right with me. It's like how the music industry used to be and how the changes have actually been positive for artists in music, whereas the record label used to own you and own all of your recordings and all of your rights, and then you've got nothing. I think that we need to challenge that. So in terms of funding, I have just retired to the fact that to make this stuff happen, we have to explore all the avenues that are open to us, which is private equity, which I'm exploring at the moment, crowdfunding, which again comes back to that social media element in terms of connecting with an audience and building an audience along the way who want to see your project come to fruition. There's some overseas funding that I've been exploring out of Dubai. They're supposedly quite interested in terms of funding New Zealand content or other content. So that's an avenue. And then even sponsorship deals in terms of working with other brands or partnerships. I think these days to fund that, there's lots of different avenues. And I guess I just looked at it for myself and went, okay, I could try and go through that door and go through with everybody else who's all competing for the same amount of content, or cast the net a little bit wider and try and get creative around looking for other avenues, rather than funding it all myself, which you can only do to a degree until you go, I've run out of money, now I need someone else to fund this.
Yeah, and how much can you plan on distribution returning your investment?
That's right, yeah. Well, and again, I think that's why I'm interested in exploring additional options outside of traditional distribution. When I produced a series about 4 years ago now, we went through a distribution company in Australia and they did some initial projections, and I think the return was only about $70,000 in terms of smaller broadcasters buying the rights, and for smaller territories, unless you've got a big name to it, then sure. And that wouldn't have even made back a portion of what the budget was. So it is hard just to rely on distribution in my experience. So it's about getting creative and looking about what are other returns on that. And something else I'm looking into is I'm really interested in building community outside of the film or events outside of your film. So, for example, Lumberjan, the feature film which I'm writing and developing at the moment, we want to create events where Lumberjan is all about sort of a woman who's in her mid-30s, has a midlife crisis. She always wanted to be a lumberjack, but she was told women can't be lumberjacks, and so she has this midlife crisis after her dad passes away and decides that she wants to be like her dad and her brothers, and she's going to become a champion lumberjack and shatter the stereotypes and prove to her teenage daughter, who's also going through something in life, that you can do whatever you want to do if you put your mind to it, and no one's going to tell you that a woman can't do that job. And so one of the things I want to do around that is, and part of building community or marketing around, is create events outside of the cinema where we have Lumberjan days where women come along and get to try and chop wood and just creating events around it. I think I am really passionate about trying to connect people outside of the theatre as well. So how do we do that with our art? How do we do that with our films that we create? And how do we create longevity around that? So we're building something, we're creating something, people get to go and experience it, but then what else can they experience around that? Maybe it's a fundraiser for a cause or something that's close or ties in with the project. And so that it has a far wider reach outside of the cinema.
It's really interesting. It's something that you see massive streamers or someone doing sort of activations around their films, but not your independent features normally. Doing something like that would be very cool to see. Let's talk about how you are pivoting now into your own projects and creative, well, everything's creative. Fiction, your own stories, things you've wanted to tell for a long time. How has this pivot come about now in your career?
It was always something I had wanted to explore. I think I wouldn't be alone in the sense of when you've spent so long working within a framework of, I produce commercials or corporate films or whatever you're doing, to step outside of that is unfamiliar. And in that stepping outside of what's familiar, it can be a bit scary and overwhelming because you go, I know I can make money doing this. How the hell am I going to make money doing that? Because in my experience, I've had to fund my own projects and everything, and I've always spent more than I made on it. So I'm like, this is not a sustainable long-term thing. So pivoting was letting go of what was familiar and learning to go, these stories that I've been writing at some point, I can keep doing what's familiar or step outside of that. And even though it's uncomfortable and you've got to find funding in different ways, I just felt that internal shift. I just felt that change, especially when I was coming up to 40. And I'm just like, okay, I've been doing this since I was a teenager. Like, at what point are you going to take a risk on your own stuff, and back your own stuff like you. But it's always hard when you do your own stuff. You're so used to making content for other people. And
yeah. The motivation, there's no deadlines, no one coming after you as such, so it's all on your own.
But it's been exciting. It's been exciting to see all of these new tools, and I think it's definitely a scary time in terms of, all the different changes that are going on in the industry, and things are shifting at a really fast rate. But I think that it's also exciting for independent filmmakers to make content cheaper and quicker, and there's less roadblocks in order to do that. And you can create a film, release it, self-distribute, if you have that thing of building your audience as well, which I think is what some filmmakers do well. There's a YouTuber who just did a theatrical release, and I believe he did quite well and made back the budget that they spent on the film, but he had spent years building an audience on YouTube and then decided to enter into that space. So look, I'm not saying that works for everybody, but I think it's something we've got to at least explore for now. So
some new strategies. Yeah, interesting. Should we talk about AI?
Sure.
It's something a lot of people, are interested in, and amateur filmmakers, those with no money or students, are starting to think about. Whereas the purists will say, "I won't touch it." Right? So I'm interested where you sit. Do you see a place for AI in your filmmaking process? Do you think it is a tool for filmmakers with limited resources, or it's sort of morally bankrupt?
Loaded question. Where do we unpack that? I think,
in a nutshell,
I think there's exciting things to it, but it's all how you use it. And unfortunately, right now, there's people create. It's easy to create stuff and it's easy to put stuff, and we're seeing a lot of stuff that does it have substance? It's looking great, but there might not be any substance to it. I believe that there will always be a shift back to what's real, and we will always, as humans, crave human-made content. So I like to hope that that's where AI is going. What excites me about it is there was a filmmaker who, he shot a film years ago, and at the time he didn't have the budget, and he wanted to do a shot from outside the vehicle with the camera coming right in and then end up in close up on the actor inside the vehicle. And the vehicle's moving at high speed. And so there was a lot of challenges when you don't have the budget to do that kind of stuff. So years later, he was trialing some of the new AI technology, took his first shot of outside the vehicle, took his second shot, the close-up on the actor, and then AI filled in the gaps in between and did his beautiful, long, sweeping shot that he wanted to do at the time. That, to me, is where I see an exciting use of AI, because it's not taking away the creative ability. It's just saying, let me remove this roadblock of this shot that I want to make. I'm still in control of my composition and everything, but utilize AI in that. Something I would really love to explore is the use of AI in dubbing. And I hate reading subtitles. I don't know if anybody else, but like, subtitles is not my favorite thing to read, because you're no longer watching the visual. Your eyes are down there on the subtitle. So I think I've seen some really exciting uses of taking an original actor's performance and even manipulating the lips and then changing it to dialogue that might be spoken by someone else. I kind of am not interested in removing the human element. I would still be interested in using real voice actors. But the fact that you can use a real voice actor to deliver the new dialogue, match that with your actor's original performance and release it into new territories under new languages real quickly, I think that's exciting. So those are sorts of ways that I think I would love to use AI. But I also know there's going to be lots of filmmakers out there who release fully AI films, and that's great. And there'll be a place for those as well. But I think there will always be a place for real art made by real people. And you just got to stay in your lane, focus on what you want to do, and let everybody else do that content. But I think at some point, that'll flood the market, and then everybody will make a return back to what is made by people.
Yeah. I mean, we're still shooting
That's my dream.
We're still shooting on film, where 3D glasses were just a fad. There's perhaps an analog revolution in a way, and we may yet have one again, back to human content.
But I think there's a lot to sort out. Like, there's no regulations. I think one country, I'm not sure if it's Sweden or Switzerland, but they're trying to introduce something where you now have full copyright over your own image. Because the thing is that all of these AI actors that we're seeing and they're generated from our photos that we've uploaded over years on Facebook and shared photos. And so it's only a matter of time when you watch some AI generated film and go, hey, I'm sure that really looks like me. So that's a little bit scary. I don't know. I don't have the answers to what we do with regulation around that or copyright, and you can just now plagiarize someone else's content and everything, which, look, has always happened for years, but now it's just a lot easier. And to feed an image into an AI image generator, and now all of a sudden you're making that person do certain things in a video and just from a photo. So that's, I guess, the dark, scary side of AI. But I try to be the forever optimist and go, okay, no, there's some cool uses for this. I'm sure there's a place for it. Yeah. And I think the place for it for me, and I think for lots of filmmakers, is, like I said, removing some of those limitations where we don't have big budgets. What's exciting is that you can now create something without a massive special effect budget, for example, where you've needed to have hundreds of compositors working on something to do some explosion or green screen effect, and now you can do that a lot easier. So that's where I think it just will open a few more doors up for more films to be made, cheaper budgets, because then it makes it more accessible. And
let's spend the rest of our time, before we take audience questions, to dive into some of your upcoming projects, what the development process has been, and tease what you're working on.
Gosh, the development process. I mean, does any creative ever have their development process figured out? I think every single time I go, where the hell do I start on this? One of the projects which we will go into production with next month is called The Waterman's Son, which is a documentary about me actually exploring my dad's history as a rower on the River Thames. He won the world's oldest rowing race, which has been going for 300 years, since 1715. And he won it in 1966. And it's been 60 years this year that he won it. He was 21. I'm twice his age. And it's a story about the metaphorical river that ran between me and my dad. And that, the things that I realized that, I didn't realize, until he had passed away. And when I became a little older myself, the conversations that I was grieving that I wish that I got to have with him, and the differences that we had. And so it's a story of, discovering that connection. A lot of young men don't have the best of relationships with their fathers. And I think sometimes, depending on generation, I know my father came from a different time, and maybe he was taught communication in a different way. And I really want to tell a story that will hopefully be helpful to people, and at the same time going on a journey of my own self-discovery. And the theme running through that is me learning to row, which I've never rowed in my life other than going in a kayak for a little bit. And by September, I need to be able to row 7.5 kilometres on the River Thames in London. So good luck to me. I don't know what I'm getting myself into, but it kept calling me. It kept sort of coming back. And I thought, if not now, when? Dive in. So we're just going through our last stages of our funding raise and working on that. And I'm excited, but also very nervous in terms of not just producing and directing behind the camera, also having to then put myself in front of the camera again and do that.
You're going to do it all. You're going to produce and direct.
So every night I've been going to bed going, won't swear, but what the hell am I getting myself into?
Wow, what a special project though.
Yeah.
And that's a feature film.
Feature documentary for that, and then of course Lumberjan, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, so a little pivot from Lumberjan. You're doing a few things at once.
Yeah.
That's a comedy feature film.
It is, yes, yes. And that will be a much longer haul in terms of that. So I'm trying to get that to a point where I need to connect with some writers, some really talented writers who can help, screenwrite dialogue. I love writing the story and fleshing that out, but I think there's a real art in writing stories or writing dialogue in a way that we'll talk naturally in conversation, but there's this skill when you see actors deliver lines that are just so beautifully crafted and written on screen that you wouldn't speak like that necessarily in real life, but I think there's an art form to it, and that's not my specialty. So I'm really interested in connecting with other writers who just have a beautiful skill in being able to bring words to life for actors to then perform off a page. So, so that's where that at. And then I have a digital series called Millionaire Lab, which again, we're just in our last phase of getting all of the funding in place. And that will be a YouTube series, which was born out of my passion for entrepreneurship and wanting to help smaller businesses in New Zealand. We have a lot of small businesses in New Zealand, which are the backbone of this country, but it's really hard, and not many of them make over $1 million a year. And I grew up watching Shark's Tank and Dragon's Den, and you'd see the pitch, but then they'd leave you there at the pitch. And I'm like, but how do they build the business? How do they actually do it? Like, you just get to see that they get the money and then it's like, great. And I wanted to see what happened next when they went into due diligence, and then, some of them didn't get funding, or did they succeed, and where did they go wrong? And just to be able to create something where other entrepreneurs can learn something. So part of the series is the businesses will work with a group of mentors so that the whole goal of the series is to actually help more Kiwi businesses become $1 million businesses. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. And
wow, when do you think that will be in production?
the end of this year. We're hoping to start shooting in November. So
And
once I get back from London and rowing on the River Thames. So
wow,
yeah, so I'm
no
really
doubt
excited.
involving some Queenstown
Yes, yeah.
millionaires playground bits and pieces.
Yeah, we're
Exciting.
wanting to shoot the studio stuff here, so it's just, I think we need some more studio space down here. So hopefully by November.
And you're looking to do post-production on all your projects kind of based here at home as much as you can?
I mean, that was one of the biggest reasons I moved to Queenstown, as I wanted to set up a post-production facility. I think that's what the region needs. I've been trying to chip away at it on my own, but no man's an island. You can't do it all on your own. And so I am excited about the potential of something like the Airburn Screen Hub and what that might bring to the region. I would love to set up a post-production facility here in terms of keeping the productions here a little bit longer. And that's still a goal that I'm slowly working away at. But as I said, it's just, you can only do so much on your own. So.
Well, if anyone, this is sort of resonating with anyone online, or they know someone who could work well with you as a writer or in working on some facilities here or anything, how can they reach out to you, or do you want to hear from any kind of people in particular?
Yeah, by all
Some
means.
writers.
I'm always open to grabbing a coffee and having a chat. And, I mean, it's been 5 years that I've been down here now, but I kind of feel a little bit guilty in the sense that, I came down here and we were really busy with production, shooting up in Auckland for a show, and then just wanting to connect a bit more with locals. So I'm really glad that we connected and you introduced me to the Southern Filmmakers Collective. And I think these events are great to be able to do that. And I think there's so much potential in this region. There's so much excitement. And I think I'd love to see more of the local stuff here. Because as I said, we know that there's all the big films that come here and everything like that and support the region. But how do we keep them here a little bit longer? So I'm like, cool, post-production facilities one way where they actually finish the film here and do the post and do the sound. And, one of my dreams when I was in my early 20s, when I first wanted to move to Queenstown, was to build a recording studio here, because I thought, how amazing would it be to be able to be doing ADR or something in a studio with it. My vision was like a glass wall that looked out to the mountains and over the lake and everything. And you're there as a singer having a recording studio, or you're doing ADR, and in the studio and out through the glass windows, and like I'm just like that was what drew me to this place. And so yeah, that's my long-term vision.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I hope that can come to life. Wow, I think we can take some audience questions. How are we going for time? 10 minutes, perfect. If anyone online would like to jump in, or anyone here to follow up on something Brad has said, what a fantastic...
Oh no, what did I say?
That was quite no. That was a really broad and really interesting chat.
Thank you.
And I'm sure things were popping up for people in their minds.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. Yeah, I love all of that. So many things going through my mind. When you went from like the short form commercial to the long form and doco and feature, was there any kind of like eureka moments where you're like, okay, I'm making the right decision based on all those challenges you had before, that you were kind of given that sort of self-assurance that you were on the right path?
Good question. I think for me, there was always the imposter syndrome. There was always that, what am I doing? Like, can I do this? But I think the eureka moment was just trusting my gut. It's just that feeling of just knowing, this is what I want to do. I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to lean into this, and all the roadblocks and all the challenges that come along the way. I spent 2 years when we first moved to Queenstown making a show that probably no one's ever going to see now. It ran into a lot of problems, and I lost a bit of money on doing that, and put a lot of my own money into it, and that was really hard. But I just knew that it was teaching me something. So I guess the eureka moments are just like trusting the process and realizing that all of the roadblocks and all of the hard things that you have to go through, like I was like, it's going to be hard for me to stay where I am making commercials for the rest of my life. And it's also going to be hard for me to lean into doing the projects that are calling me and that are in my heart that I really want to tell. So I always say, like, choose your level of hard. Like, it's hard to stay where you are, and it's also hard to, you know, try something new. So I guess I've always just lent into that and lent into being uncomfortable and being scared shitless, but just doing it anyway.
Did we have one online? Hi, Dallas.
Thanks so much for talking to us. I loved all of this. I feel like I could listen to you for 4 hours.
Oh, thank you.
I loved hearing about your start and so young. I just found that just so incredibly impressive and fascinating. And I've all the way along listening to you, I've thought, do you ever take mental advice from your younger self? And just thinking back to how audacious you would have been and how naive, and like how that naivety makes us audacious and gives us you know, like we just, like you say, we try things that we don't know we're not meant to try. You know, we don't know that we shouldn't say this or ask for that, or you know, I just wonder, do you sort of remember your younger self sometimes and just think like, actually I would have done this when I was like 18, so why not? You know, do you still remember back to that?
I love that. And yes, 100%. I think, as I said, as we get older, I think when I was younger, I had this reckless abandon of just doing anything and trying it. And then as you get older, you start getting into your own head a little bit more and questioning all your decisions. And often I find myself going back and talking to that inner boy who's like, look, you just took it. Like, why are you afraid of asking for funding? Or like, you've got a project and you need money to make that. Why are you afraid of asking, hey, I need some help? And that help comes in the form of some funding at the moment, which is going to help me tell the story. So I'm so glad that I had those letters that I could look back on and go back and see my 15-year-old self writing letters to people going like, hey, I need $1,000 to make my little TV show. So now it's just that I'm asking for a lot more money, but yes, I channel him a lot in terms of getting out of my own headspace and just trusting that, trusting the ability to just figure it out. And I think that's really important. That's something I talk to myself a lot about, especially when it's something new that I'm about to do that I haven't done before, like working on these current projects. I don't have the experience that backs it up to say, yes, you can make a box office feature film. And when you've never done that before, you've kind of just got to rely on this this optimistic approach to go, I'll figure this out. And so I like to try and stack evidence of times where I've figured something else out in the past. And there's a lady I follow online called Marie Forleo, and her whole mantra is everything is figure-outable. And so I like to sit when I'm feeling challenged and I'm feeling like, oh my God, how am I going to make this happen? I like to just stack the evidence of times in my life where I've made other things happen. Maybe not on the scale that I'm trying to do, but I went, hey, you figured that out. And then you figured that out. And then when that happened and you had that roadblock, you managed to find a way. So that's where I guess I go back to my inner boy, my younger self, and go, trust in your ability to figure it out. And then, you know, there's got to be a degree of just hopeless optimism. I used to say for years, like, I'm just a hopeless optimist. Like, I'm just like, yeah, we'll figure it out. I will. And the thing is that, you know, we only live once. I just keep telling myself, do you want to get to the end of your life and then you're in your 80s or 90s or whatever, and then you go, man, I wish I did that. I think that's the worst thing. So when I find myself wanting to back out, or I start to feel like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this, I go, what's going to be worse? You feeling uncomfortable right now, or you living with regret at 80 in a rest home being like, I wish I gave that a go. So that was the worst feeling for me. So
I feel like that's a good antidote to the imposter syndrome as well. Like that attitude, for me it is, but you know, I think just that attitude of well, what's the worst that can happen? Look at what I've achieved to date and like all the problems I've solved to date. So, oh, that's really good. I love your attitude. It's fantastic.
Thank you, Dallas. I appreciate it. I appreciate the question.
What a pleasure having you here, Brad. Thank you so very, very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated the chat, and
been wonderful.
I can't wait to collaborate with some more people down here on
Yeah.
some cool projects and hear what other people are doing, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can
Brilliant.
get our post-production facility off the ground and support some more projects down here.
Yeah, beautiful. I want to do a quick plug on that topic. If you want to see some other local filmmakers' work, the Southern Filmmakers Collective is doing Little Cinema again. We have submissions open at the moment for your short films under about 15 minutes to put them on the big screen for you, show them to other filmmakers and mingle. That's coming up. So that's open for submissions now, but you've got to get your films in quick because we're screening in just under a month in Queenstown and Wanaka, and we will have a Dunedin at some short point after that as well. So those based in Otago, Southland, or who've shot something here, shot something elsewhere, but are from here, please send us your projects. And please come along to a screening. We're gifting you a couple of tickets to please come along.
Awesome. I'll be there.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone online. Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
And we should smile down that camera for a nice little photo.